Have you ever walked into a room and felt like no one really saw you? Not because you were hidden, or quiet, or unimportant, but because the world seems to have stopped looking. These days, everything feels louder, brighter, faster. It's as if we're all surrounded by noise-constant chatter, scrolling headlines, opinions shouted into the void, and, somewhere in that storm, something sacred gets lost. Not our value, but our visibility. You might still show up. You might still contribute, listen, love, and offer your presence with quiet strength. But it can feel like the world is moving too fast to notice. Too busy to see the wisdom in stillness. Too distracted to recognize the beauty in a weathered face, a gentle hand, or a soul who's been through the fire and still chooses grace. If you've ever sat across the table from a group and felt invisible, if you've shared a story and watched it vanish under the weight of someone's phone, if you've ever wondered, when did the world stop seeing people like me? This video is for you, because the truth is, you're not invisible. You never were. But sometimes, the world forgets how to see what's real. So today, we're going to remember. Together. Not by shouting louder, but by living deeper. Not by trying to fit back into a world that moved on without asking, but by creating a space where you can be fully seen, fully valued, fully alive. Let's begin. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time someone really looked at you? Not just a glance in passing. Not a polite nod, but truly looked and saw your story? Noticed the strength behind your eyes, the years you've carried, the love you've poured out, the battles you've fought quietly, while still showing up for others. Because here's what I've seen, again and again, especially in people over 60. The world praises youth and speed, but it forgets the power of presence. It forgets that real wisdom isn't loud, it's lived. And sometimes, that lived wisdom gets overlooked in a society that worships novelty over depth. Maybe you felt it. You speak and someone interrupts. You share an idea, and it's brushed aside. You offer kindness, and it goes unnoticed. And little by little, without meaning to, a lie begins to whisper in your ear. Maybe I don't matter as much anymore. But that's not the truth. That's just the echo of a culture that's forgotten how to honor its elders. You matter more than ever. And not because of what you produce, or fix, or offer, but because of who you are. And today, we're going to take that truth back, with dignity, with peace, and one clear, courageous step at a time. There's something happening quietly all around us, something we don't talk about enough. It's not loud. It doesn't make headlines. But for millions of people, especially in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, it hurts. It's the quiet ache of invisibility. Not because you faded, not because your light has dimmed, but because somewhere along the way, the world stopped looking for it. We live in a culture that idolizes what's new, what's trending, what's viral. And in that race toward the next thing, it's easy to overlook the people who've already lived through 10 versions of the next thing. The problem isn't just societal, it's personal. When you feel unseen long enough, you begin to shrink yourself. You stop raising your hand. You stop sharing your thoughts. You stop believing that what you say will matter. So you say less. And that leads to something even more dangerous than invisibility. Disconnection. Because we are wired for connection. To be known. To be valued. Not just in our youth or in our peak productive years, but especially in the decades when we carry the most wisdom, the deepest compassion, and the richest stories. You see, visibility isn't about attention. It's about acknowledgement. About someone saying with their eyes, I see you, you matter, you're still here, and that means something. So yes, this topic matters. Because when people stop feeling seen, they start to forget how to see themselves. And we're not going to let that happen, not to you, not to anyone who still has breath in their lungs and something sacred to offer. Today, we're going to break the silence around invisibility, and in its place, we'll build something far more powerful. Presence. So where do we begin? We begin not by fixing ourselves because you are not broken. We begin by returning to ourselves, by remembering that even in a noisy world, you have a voice, a presence, a light. And that light doesn't need permission to shine. If you've been feeling overlooked lately by society, by your family, maybe even by yourself, this is not your fault. You are not invisible. You've just been standing in a fog of distraction that was never meant for you in the first place. And if the world has stopped listening, then maybe it's time for you to start speaking again. Not louder, but clearer. Not with force, but with depth. You don't need to compete with the noise. You just need to return to what's real. That's what these 11 practices are about. They're not tips in the shallow sense. They're reminders. Invitations. Pathways back to the kind of visibility that starts from within and radiates outward into your relationships, your routines, your conversations, your presence. These aren't about demanding attention. They're about reclaiming dignity, not to impress anyone, not to prove anything, but to walk through the world as someone who knows they belong in every room they enter. Some of these may feel simple. Others may challenge you, but all of them point to one deeper truth. You don't have to disappear in order to stay kind. You don't have to stay small in order to be loved. And you don't have to accept invisibility as the price of growing older. So today, we will walk through 11 deeply human ways to reclaim your place without shouting, without rushing, without changing who you are, because who you are is enough, and always has been. As we move through each one, I invite you to reflect, not just on the words, but on the places in your life where you've been shrinking, where you've been waiting for someone else to invite you back into the center of your own story. This is that invitation. Let's begin gently, honestly, with the first way. Way 1. Stop dismissing your own voice. Let's begin with something many people do without realizing. They dismiss their own voice. And I don't just mean speaking in conversations. I mean the inner voice, the quiet knowing, the opinions, the ideas, the stories, the instincts that rise up from within, only to be pushed down before they can fully form. You've probably done it too. You get an idea in a group setting, and before the words can even leave your mouth, something whispers, "Don't say that. No one's asking." It doesn't matter. So you stay quiet, and the moment passes, and maybe someone else says something similar, and everyone listens. And you sit there thinking, "I was just about to say that." That's how it begins. A slow erosion of your own voice. Not because you don't have anything to say, but because you stopped believing it would be heard. Here's the truth. Silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's fear dressed in politeness. When you've spent years being the caregiver, the reliable one, the background strength, it becomes second nature to put others first, to make room, to yield, to say, "It's fine," even when it's not. But now, in this chapter of your life, I want you to consider this. How much of your wisdom is going unspoken? How many stories are still inside you, waiting to be told, not for applause, but for connection, not to impress, but to express? Because here's the impact. The more you silence yourself, the more invisible you feel. Not because others are ignoring you, but because you have stopped showing up for your own truth. Over time, people get used to your silence. And the tragedy is, they assume it means you're content, when really, it might mean you've just given up trying. But it's not too late to shift that. So what's the solution? It starts small. You don't need to start giving speeches. You don't need to dominate conversations. You just need to start honoring your voice again. Speak up in small ways. Share your thoughts, even when they feel unfinished. Tell a story at the dinner table, even if it's been told before. Let people hear your perspective, not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. That's what people remember. If something matters to you, say so. If something feels off, name it. If you have an idea, offer it. This isn't about taking space away from others. It's about finally giving some back to yourself. Now here's a deeper question I want to leave you with. When did you start believing that your voice only mattered if someone else approved of it? And what would happen if, starting today, you spoke as if your words were worth hearing because they are? Sometimes, the journey back to visibility isn't about being seen by the world. It's about being heard by you. So start there. Say the thing, not for attention, but for truth. Way 2. Stop shrinking to keep the peace. There's a particular kind of invisibility that doesn't come from being ignored. It comes from making yourself smaller on purpose. You've probably done it before. Maybe at a family gathering where strong opinions were flying and you quietly swallowed your own just to avoid the tension. Maybe in your marriage where you compromised one more time because it seemed easier than speaking up. Or maybe with your adult children where you softened your needs, lowered your expectations, or accepted being sidelined because you didn't want to rock the boat. This is what we call shrinking to keep the peace. And on the surface, it seems noble, quiet, mature. You tell yourself you're being the bigger person. You don't want to be difficult. You've lived long enough to know which battles are worth fighting. And sometimes, that's true, but sometimes it's not peace you're protecting. It's comfort. Their comfort. And your silence becomes the cost. Here's the impact of that kind of shrinking. You disappear from the very relationships that matter most. You become easier to manage, but harder to connect with. And the people around you, even if they love you deeply, stop seeing the full picture of who you are, not because they mean to, but because you've quietly erased the parts of yourself that might challenge them. Over time, this creates a loneliness that words can't name. You're not alone, but you're not fully present either. And that's a kind of grief most people don't talk about. So what's the solution? It's not to become combative or difficult. It's to start showing up whole. To let your preferences, your needs, your boundaries be visible, even if they cause a ripple, even if they inconvenience someone. Because peace without truth isn't peace. It's performance. Start small. Say no when you mean no. Say, that doesn't work for me, without a lengthy explanation. Say, actually, I'd prefer this, when making plans. You don't have to apologize for existing in full color. You don't have to dim, so someone else can shine. Here's your reflection today. Where have you been shrinking? Not because you had to, but because it felt easier than being fully seen. And what if starting now, you let people meet the real you? Not just the agreeable version, because true connection only happens when we show up honestly. And you, exactly as you are worthy of being known, not just loved. Way 3. Stop waiting to be invited. There's a quiet kind of heartbreak that builds over time when invitations stop coming. You used to be on the guest list. People used to call, include you, check in. But lately, the phone doesn't ring as often. The group texts move on without you. The dinners happen, and you hear about them after the fact. And a small voice inside you wonders, did I do something wrong? Have I been forgotten? You didn't, and you haven't. But here's the hard truth most people don't say out loud. After a certain age, the invitations slow down. Not because people don't care, but because they assume you're settled. They assume you're busy. They assume you're fine. Or they just don't think about it. And if you wait too long for others to reach out, the silence can start to feel personal. But it's not always personal. It's just life. People get distracted, pull it in different directions, and in the absence of a clear yes from you, they may assume a quiet no. That's the impact of waiting to be invited. You start sitting on the sidelines of your own life. You stop initiating. You stop suggesting. You stop showing up because somewhere deep down, you started believing you weren't wanted. But let's flip that. What if the next chapter of your life isn't about being invited, but about doing the inviting? You don't have to wait to be chosen. You can create the moments. You can pick up the phone. You can plan the lunch, start the book club, gather the group for coffee, or a walk around the park. You can be the spark again, not the afterthought. It might feel awkward at first. You might hear no, but you might also hear, I'm so glad you called. You might be surprised how many people were feeling the same way. So, here's the reflection. What connection are you longing for right now, and who could you reach out to, even today, to begin it? You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. And you do not need to wait to be chosen in order to belong. Start showing up where your heart wants to be, whether someone invited you or not. Way 4. Stop dressing to disappear. Let's talk about something we rarely give enough credit to, the way we dress and the silent messages it sends, not just to others, but to ourselves. You might not think about it much anymore. Maybe you grab whatever's clean. Maybe you've told yourself it doesn't matter, that comfort is all that counts. Maybe, after a certain age, the thought becomes, why bother? But here's what I've noticed. After talking to hundreds of men and women in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, many people stop dressing in ways that make them feel alive, because somewhere along the way, they started believing they were supposed to fade into the background. Not on purpose, but gradually, the bright colors are packed away. The accessories stay in the drawer. The pieces that once made you feel elegant, expressive, or powerful get replaced with safe, neutral, invisible. And over time, this impacts more than your appearance. It affects how you carry yourself, how you enter a room, how you see your own reflection. The impact? You begin to blend in with the noise, even though your soul was never meant to be muted. You forget what it feels like to express your spirit on the outside. And, little by little, you stop feeling seen because you've stopped showing who you really are. So, what's the solution? No, it's not about buying a whole new wardrobe or chasing trends that don't fit your season of life. It's about returning to intention, wearing clothes that feel like you, putting on the scarf that makes you feel bold, choosing the shirt with color, with texture, with personality, wearing the brooch your mother gave you, or the shoes that make you stand taller. It's not vanity, it's visibility. It's a statement that says, I am still here, and I still matter. Try this. The next time you dress to leave the house, ask yourself not, what's appropriate, but what feels like me today? 1. To see dot, and, oh, and, I. Try this, and I. 2. What would I wear if I wasn't afraid of being noticed? Because sometimes, the simplest way to stop feeling invisible is to dress like you know you're not. Here's your reflection. What piece of yourself have you been hiding behind neutral tones and safe choices? And what might shift inside and out if you gave yourself permission to be seen again? You don't need anyone's approval to wear joy. Let it drape across your shoulders like light. You've earned the right to be seen and to shine in your own style. Way 5. Stop apologizing for taking up space. Have you ever noticed how often people, especially older adults, apologize for simply being? Sorry, I'm in the way. Sorry, I talk too much. Sorry to bother you. Sorry, I need help with this. Sorry, I can't move as fast as I used to. It's subtle, almost automatic. But over time, those small apologies chip away at something sacred. Your right to exist fully and unapologetically. Now, let me be clear. Kindness and humility are beautiful traits, but there's a difference between being gracious and being invisible. And too often, we confuse politeness with self-erasure. Here's the reason this matters. When you constantly apologize for taking up space, whether it's physical, emotional, or conversational, you begin to internalize the belief that your presence is a burden. And the world reflects that back to you, not always out of malice, but because people tend to take their cues from how we treat ourselves. The impact? You become quieter in rooms where your wisdom is needed. You hesitate to ask for help when you need support. You stop making requests, stop sharing stories, stop stepping forward because deep down, you've convinced yourself that other people's needs matter more. But you are not an inconvenience. You are not too much. And you do not need to apologize for existing as a full human being. So, what's the solution? It begins with noticing. Notice when those little sorries creep in, not the sincere ones, but the reflexive ones. And instead of defaulting to guilt, try replacing them with presence. Instead of, sorry I'm slow, try, thanks for your patience. Instead of sorry for talking so much, say, thank you for listening. Instead of shrinking, stand grounded in the fact that you have earned your space. Every line on your face, every step you take, every breath you draw, it all tells a story. A story that deserves room to unfold. This isn't about arrogance, it's about honor. Honoring your journey, your experience, your being. Here's your reflection. Where in your life have you been apologizing for simply being who you are? And what might open up if you stop saying sorry for taking up space and started saying yes to taking your place? Because the world doesn't need you to shrink. It needs you to stand fully, quietly, powerfully, exactly as you are. Way 6. Stop surrounding yourself with people who don't see you. Let's talk about relationships, not the dramatic, headline kind, but the quiet ones that fill your days. The friend you've known for years, who only calls when they need something. The adult child, who never asks how you are. The neighbors, who greet you out of habit, not warmth. The group you show up for, even when you leave feeling empty. Sometimes, the deepest loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being surrounded by people who don't really see you. They see your role. They see your history. They see your usefulness. But do they see your heart? Your growth? The person you still are becoming? Here's the hard truth. Many of us tolerate shallow relationships out of habit, guilt, or fear of rocking the boat. We stay in one-sided dynamics because we've convinced ourselves that something is better than nothing. But is it? The impact of this is real. You spend your energy on people who drain rather than fill. You second-guess your value when you're around them. And worst of all, you begin to forget what it feels like to be celebrated. Not just tolerated. But here's the good news. You get to choose again. The solution? You don't need to burn bridges. You don't need to make dramatic exits. You just need to start realigning your energy toward people who reflect your light back to you. The ones who ask how you're doing and wait for the answer. The ones who notice your silences, remember your stories, laugh at your jokes, value your presence. And if those people aren't in your life right now, create space for them to enter. Join that local class. Say yes to a new group. Spark a new friendship with someone who feels easy to be around. It's never too late to build new community, one rooted in mutual care, not obligation. So here's your reflection. Who in your life truly sees you and who merely passes through your light without noticing? And more importantly, what would it mean to choose presence over proximity? Depth over default? Because you don't need to beg for connection. You just need to stop settling for less than you deserve. The people who are meant for your next chapter will see you, and they'll show up accordingly. Way 7. Stop letting technology replace human connection. We live in a world that connects faster than ever, but somehow people feel more isolated than ever. And for many older adults, the shift has been jarring. Once, connection meant handwritten letters, shared meals, phone calls that lasted for hours. Now, it's texts with no punctuation, blue thumbs, emojis instead of voices. You scroll through updates from people you love, but something feels hollow because seeing someone's life through a screen is not the same as being in it. The reason this matters is simple. Technology is a tool, it's not a replacement. And when we let it replace real connection, we start to feel like spectators in a life we're still trying to live. The truth is, technology can amplify your voice, or it can drown it. It can connect, or it can isolate. It all depends on how it's used. And here's the impact of letting tech replace touch. You start to feel like a name on a contact list instead of a soul in someone's life. You might get messages, but not presence. Photos, but not conversations. Likes, but not love. But it doesn't have to stay that way. So, what's the solution? Use technology intentionally, not reactively. Don't just wait for someone to message. You pick up the phone and call. Don't just like your granddaughter's photo, ask her to come over and tell you about it. If your friends are always texting, suggest a real meetup, a walk, a lunch, a visit without screens. And if your circle is tech-bound and distant, reach out to someone local, someone new. It's not about replacing the digital, it's about balancing it. You deserve voices, not just vibrations. Eye contact, not just icons. Shared laughter in real rooms, not just forwarded jokes. Here's your reflection. What kind of connection is your soul craving right now? And are you using technology as a bridge to that? Or as a barrier? It's okay to be old-fashioned in how you connect. In fact, it might be the most revolutionary thing you do. Because in a world that's forgotten how to be together, your presence is a gift. Way 8. Stop postponing your own joy. Joy isn't just for children. It's not reserved for weddings or grand vacations. It doesn't have an age limiter, an expiration date. But somewhere along the line, many of us start believing that joy is something to earn, not something to feel. You raised the family. You paid the bills. You showed up for everyone. And now, you catch yourself saying things like, maybe when the house is clean. Maybe after the doctor's appointment. Maybe once I finish helping so-and-so. And joy stays on the back burner. Again, but here's the reason this one matters so deeply. Joy isn't a reward for getting everything right. It's part of what keeps you alive. And when you continually postpone your joy, you start to live on autopilot, getting through days instead of inhabiting them. You start to feel invisible, not just to others, but to yourself. Because when was the last time you did something just because it made you smile? The impact of postponed joy is subtle, but soul deep. Your days feel flat. Your routine becomes a loop. And even when everything looks fine from the outside, you feel a little faded inside. Not broken, not depressed, just muted. But joy has a sound, a light, a rhythm, and your life still deserves to dance in it. So what's the solution? It starts with reclaiming small moments. Play your favorite music in the kitchen, even if no one's coming over. Buy yourself the good coffee. Wear the soft sweater. Sit outside in the sun and let your mind wander. Pick up that paintbrush, plant something, take the scenic route. Watch a funny movie and laugh out loud. Not because anyone's watching, but because you're still here. Joy doesn't require permission. It just requires presence. Here's your reflection. What is something simple that used to bring you joy, that you've stopped doing? And what if starting today, you made space for it again? Not next week. Not when everything's done. But now, because joy is not selfish. It's sacred. And your joy, you're real, honest, unfiltered joyous, a quiet protest against invisibility. It says, I still feel, I still matter, I still live. Way 9. Stop believing that it's too late. There's a lie that floats through the air as we grow older, whispered, in advertising, in entertainment, even in the way people speak to us. It's the lie that says, that ship has sailed. Too late to start over. Too old to try something new. Why bother now? It sounds logical. It sounds practical, but it is deeply untrue. Because here's the reason this matters. When you believe it's too late, you stop beginning. You stop dreaming. You stop reaching. You stop imagining a version of your life that could still surprise you. And if you're not careful, that belief becomes a wall between you and everything still possible. The impact? You stay in patterns that no longer fit. You decline invitations that could have changed your rhythm. You wake up each day with less and less curiosity until life becomes something you endure rather than explore. But here's what I've seen with my own eyes. I've seen women start painting at 72 and open their first gallery at 78. I've seen men learn guitar at 65 and play on stage at 70. I've seen people fall in love again deeply, freely in their 80s, not despite their age, but because of the freedom it brought. So what's the solution? You stop asking, is it too late? And you start asking, why not now? Write the book. Take the class. Plant the tree. Join the choir. Say yes to the thing that scares you a little, because growth always feels like that at first. And here's the truth. You're not running out of time. You're standing in it. And this moment is ripe for beginning. Here's your reflection. What have you quietly told yourself is too late to try? And what if that story isn't true? What if the real story begins here with one brave choice to start again? Because the world is full of endings. But you still have chapters left to write. Way 10. Stop dismissing your wisdom as just experience. You've lived through things others only read about. You've endured loss, built families, changed careers, survived mistakes, forgiven deeply, started over. You've navigated decades of changing times, shifting values, evolving technologies, and you're still here. But how often do you downplay that? How often do you say, oh, I'm just old-fashioned, or it was different back then, or I don't want to bore you with stories. So you stay quiet. You don't share the lesson. You don't offer the insight, because you've started to believe that your lived experience isn't relevant anymore. But here's the deeper truth. Wisdom is not a relic. It's a light. And in a world drowning in information but starving for meaning, your stories, your lessons, your voice, they matter now more than ever. The impact of dismissing your own wisdom is this. A younger generation grows up without guides. Families repeat cycles you've already broken. And the world keeps spinning without pausing to listen to the ones who've walked the longest roads. You have seen how things unfold. You've earned your insight, not through books, but through becoming. So, what's the solution? Start sharing. Not to lecture, but to offer. Tell the story. The one you think no one wants to hear it. Maybe exactly what someone else needs. Write it down. Say it out loud. Record your voice for your grandchildren. Share the wisdom you would have given your younger self. Not everyone will understand, but those who are meant to will never forget it. And in doing so, you remind yourself that you are not just surviving time, you are shaping it. Here's your reflection. What part of your story have you been keeping quiet that the world might actually need to hear? And what if by speaking it, you don't just reclaim your visibility, you light a path for someone else? Your life is not just experience, it's legacy. And legacies are meant to be shared. Way 11. Stop forgetting that presence is power. There's a kind of presence that doesn't need to speak loudly, dress boldly, or dominate a room. It simply is. It's the kind of presence that shifts the energy when you walk in. The kind that steadies others when they're anxious. The kind that listens deeply and is remembered long after the noise fades. And chances are, you carry that kind of presence. But somewhere along the way, you may have forgotten. Because we live in a world that equates visibility with volume. If you're not trending, posting, talking, reacting, responding, are you even here? Yes. Yes, you are. Because presence is not performance. True presence is power. Quiet power. Lasting power. The kind that doesn't demand attention, it commands respect. Here's the reason this matters. When you forget the strength of your presence, you start to believe that your impact is gone, that your silence means you've disappeared, that if people don't acknowledge you constantly, you no longer matter. But that's not truth. That's noise talking. The impact of forgetting your presence? You stop showing up fully. You move through rooms like a ghost instead of a grounding force. And worst of all, you begin to believe the lie that your value is tied to how much attention you receive. But presence is different. It's not something you chase. It's something you embody. So what's the solution? Return to your center. Breathe. Remember, your worth doesn't rise and fall with how often people notice you. It rises the moment you notice yourself. Try this. The next time you're in a roomany room, don't try to blend in. Don't try to stand out either. Just be rooted. Breathe deeper. Speak slower. Look someone in the eye. Let yourself occupy space with dignity and watch what happens. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more presence. And you, dear soul, are the embodiment of it. Here's your reflection. Where in your life have you forgotten the quiet strength of simply being fully present? And what if starting today, you gave yourself permission to stop proving and start being? Because visibility isn't about being seen by everyone. It's about being present enough to be known by the right ones. And it starts with you. So, if you've been feeling invisible, maybe it's not because you've faded. Maybe it's because the world has gotten loud, fast, and distracted. But here's what you must remember. You are not background noise. You are not the afterthought. You are not invisible. You are a living archive of wisdom, of love, of experience. And the world needs that now more than ever. But visibility doesn't begin with someone else noticing you. It begins with you noticing you. Speaking when you used to stay silent. Stepping forward when you used to shrink. Choosing joy, style, presence, connection, not to prove anything, but to live fully, freely, and on your own terms. There is still so much life left in you. So many stories to tell. So many rooms to walk into with quiet confidence. You were never meant to disappear. You were meant to shine in your own way, steady, soulful, and unshakably you. Before you go, take a quiet moment to reflect. Which of these 11 ways spoke most deeply to your heart today? Was it a habit you're ready to release? A truth you've been longing to live? Whatever it was, I invite you to share it in the comments below. Not just for yourself, but for the quiet soul reading through. Looking for someone who understands. Your words may be the encouragement they didn't know they needed. And if this video made you feel seen, supported, or inspired in any way, please give it a like. It helps others find this message too. And don't forget to subscribe to Wisdom Way Insight for more thoughtful, uplifting content created with you in mind. This channel is here to remind you, aging isn't disappearing, it's deepening. It's not about becoming less visible, it's about becoming more fully yourself. So I'll leave you with this. What would change in your life, in our world, if we began to see aging not as decline, but as awakening? Maybe the question isn't, how do we stay relevant? Maybe it's, what kind of wisdom are we here to reveal next? You are not done. You are not forgotten. You are becoming. And we're honored to walk beside you.